Hi, this is Ken Parker welcoming you to another episode of Common Ground, the policy roundtable where we bring together a panel with diverse views on issues of concern to Newton residents and try to hammer out some of our differences. For those of you who are new to the show, let's review the rules. First, I introduce a topic. Then, I go around the table once, asking each panelist to express a viewpoint. I then select the two panelists who disagree the most strongly, which is going to be really easy today for obvious reasons, and ask them to speak directly to one another in hopes of finding some area of agreement. At the end of the segment, I give an assessment of how we did at finding common ground and put in my 2 cents on the topic. And as usual with the show, we have a fabulous panel, and as we sometimes do, we have a theme. This is our post-municipal election special, as it were, and we'll be talking about the implications of the 2019 municipal election in Newton for the city going forward, both in terms of public policy and in terms of politics. So without further ado, let me introduce our fabulous panel. To my left is Matt Yospin.
Hi, Ken.
Welcome back to Common Ground, Matt.
Thanks, Ken. Nice to be here.
Good to see. Well, let me just say this, Matt. Let me say this coherently if I can, and incoherently if not. I don't see you around here enough.
We really should do this more often, Ken.
Yeah, shouldn't we?
Let's get together. Do you have time free in your schedule?
Maybe the fourth Tuesday of the month we could talk about legal stuff.
That'd be great. We should have a TV show to do that.
That's a great idea. Let's get that one booked.
Awesome.
Fourth Tuesday of every month.
Perfect.
All right. Okay.
I'll see you next week.
And Matt, of course, is a patent attorney with offices in Newton and Boston. yospinlaw.com, I believe.
Yep, that's my website.
And also a neighborhood activist, I think it's fair to say,
Yes.
Particularly in the Newtonville neighborhood of the city, but often citywide, your activism extends its
That's
tendrils.
right. I'm willing to show up and be active in all parts of the city.
Anyway, well, welcome back to Common Ground, Matt. It's great
Thanks,
to have
Ken.
you.
Thank you.
And to my right, Steve Feinstein. I don't know if you're to my right, in terms of maybe a little bit politically.
I could try to play that part.
Anyway, so flexible. That's great. And of course, Steve works in the technology field. Is it fair to say?
Yes, the artificial intelligence area. Also, we like to say real intelligence sometimes because
the organic intelligence.
Something
is
about artificial
kind of
that makes it feel not real.
So it's real machine intelligence.
It's machines being really intelligent.
And do you want to say where you work, or is this something that you'd have to tell us?
I can't say, but it has something to do with MIT, and it's near the town of Lincoln, and it's a laboratory. So,
okay.
But I can't say the name. So.
Right, because they'd have to,
No, I can actually say the name, but I like to say that I can't say the name.
It's way
more
cooler
interesting.
that way. Yeah, no. It makes it look like you work for some kind of government agency or something,
Don't say that.
Oh, geez, sorry. And of course, Steve, you've many roles in the community. One of which was work as an elected official in our city, as a member of the Newton Highlands Area Council for a number of years.
I loved it. Yeah, I did that for 4 years or so.
Okay.
And I got involved in different aspects of what was going on with the area council, but the biggest project that I took on, which has become an annual thing for me, is running Highlands Village Day.
And it's tremendous public service that you do. Thank you for
I
continuing
love doing it. It's very positive. People love it. It's not controversial at all.
Well, it is controversial when it rains, so thank you for preventing the rain the last couple of times. That was good.
Yes.
That was good planning.
That's the hardest part.
I don't know who you paid for that, but beautiful weather is what we expect.
It's a secret. I can't tell because then
So it's in what is it, the second weekend of June?
It's the second Sunday of June, so I think this year it's June 14th.
Or this coming year, the 20th?
I'm sorry, in 2020 it's June 14th. So mark your calendars, save the date.
Lincoln Street in Newton Highlands, it's a party. I mean, it is really a terrific
We have
event.
a lot of fun in Newton Highlands.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's really no place like home. That's right. Anyway, so Steve, thanks very much for coming back on the show.
It's a pleasure.
Lots to talk about. So let's start with some meaty policy.
Okay.
The biggest issue, I think it's fair to say, that was on the lips and on minds of Newton residents as they went to the polls in this last election last week was planning and development and zoning and special permitting, the whole land use ball of wax, as it were. There were certainly some active groups that were saying Newton is developing too fast, or there are at least people who want to build too much too fast. And then there are other folks who said we have a moral imperative to build lots of housing and build because it's going to save the planet, it's going to be great for the environment, it's going to be great for affordable housing to build a lot of, and not just affordable housing, we just need, Boston area needs more housing, we should build a lot of housing. So the range of opinion among the candidates, there was one candidate who said at the area council sponsored debate that she would like to add more than 11,000 new units of housing over the next 10 years. So basically add 1/3 to Newton's residential mix to its population over the next decade. And she also wanted to do away with single family zoning, or was interested in pursuing that. Whereas other people, I think at the most, the opposite end of the spectrum, with people saying, well, I support growth, but I think it should be measured. And I don't think there was anyone running who was against new development. But there was quite a range of opinion on this, and there were certainly slates that were going around by email. So I have a really simple question for the panel. Who won? Did the aggressive, lots of development people win? Did the let's go slow people win? Tap the brakes on this win, or was it a tie? Are we basically where we were before the election? Matt, I'll let you lead this one off.
I think it's a mixed bag so far. And we haven't seen, there are some newcomers to the city council, newly elected members who haven't been sworn in yet. We, I think, have a good sense of what their positions are likely to be. But seeing, who lost, who didn't win re-election, who won re-election, I think we're going to have roughly the same number of yes to many huge developments at any cost votes, and no to huge development at any cost votes. And instead, those votes are going to be in favor of more moderate development, smaller number of units, smaller buildings, fewer of them.
So you're basically saying this election didn't change anything? Is that your?
That's my gut take.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What do you think, Steve?
I tend to agree. By my count, there were a couple of newcomers to the city council on either side. So I can't think of all the names. I think Julia Maliki, Pam Wright. There was Alicia Bowman, who is on the other side, who's more pro-development, mm-hmm. and also changing zoning. So
there were five new councilors.
Right. But I think it was pretty split. But in Ward 5, mm-hmm. the ward councilor race, mm-hmm. there was a write-in. So it's hard to parse that because we don't know what would have happened without the write-in.
But putting aside the politics of it, in terms of the composition of the city council,
I don't think it changes all that much. And also, I think that we're sort of on a path to do the development. Mm-hmm. So I don't see it. There are people that are saying go slow.
Nobody taps the brakes, in other words.
Right. Yeah, I mean, people are saying let's slow down
mm-hmm.
on Riverside, or let's make sure we do this right.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see any roadblocks to getting this stuff done ultimately. Mm-hmm. So I think that no significant change to the composition of the city council overall, and therefore what we've seen happening will probably continue to happen.
Well, can we look at this in detail? And I don't have the list of our 24 city councilors memorized.
Matthew.
I know, shockingly. But
as long as you can recite the 100 members of the U.S. Senate, I'll let you off the hook on this.
That's easy. In the U.S. Senate, I have 2 elected representatives, and so do you, and so do you.
Right.
And in the Congress, I have 1. I have 3 total in the federal government.
Yeah.
In the Newton city government, I have not 3,
Okay.
Do you know how many representatives each of us has in elected
reps?
Let's
see. 16 at large plus 1 ward councilor is 17, plus 8 at large school committee members is 25,
right.
plus a mayor is 26.
That's right.
And if you had 2 people running for each office, you could have literally 52 candidates.
Yeah.
You'd have a deck of cards.
You could have a deck of cards.
to get to know them all at election time.
Your elected reps, I mean, you could make an alphabet rhyme. There's one for every letter of the alphabet in Newton city government.
That would work too, yeah.
Some might say that perhaps we should reduce the size of the city council.
Or maybe the number of at-large and have more elected from a district. That's probably
I
a topic for
have an
another day.
idea. Why don't we have like 8 of each?
Eight
I think that's a
word
great
council.
idea,
large
Steve.
and 8 local
that,
ones.
That sounds vaguely familiar somehow.
And so
Somebody should
reasonable.
propose that.
that seems so reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay. On the topic of what's likely to happen with the newly elected members,
Yes.
run through for me, please, who won
Yeah, so-
and who they replaced.
I have a list right
Do
here.
you, Steve?
Yes.
You're making a
So,
list, and are you checking it twice?
Of
I
course
checked
he
it.
is.
This is the 3rd time through. So there is, I
Seasonal
think we can
humor.
say the R word in Ward 6, right? The
Recount.
recount.
Yes.
Okay.
So, but aside
so-
from what you're talking about there is the Ward 6 at-large race, where incumbents Vicki Danberg and Greg Schwartz sought re-election, and challenger Alicia Bowman challenged both of them effectively. 3 candidates for 2 seats. Vicki Danberg came in first. She's definitely re-elected. Alicia Bowman came in second. Looks like is
By 30 votes.
And then Greg Schwartz was behind by 30 votes and is, I believe, seeking, as you said, the R word, a recount, which 30 votes citywide is, of course he's seeking a recount. That's less than 1 vote per precinct. Any kind of scanning, these are just scanning machines. It's not like it's a perfect science. If you were off by, your numbers, Guy, what percentage would you have to be off by?
Oh, don't make me do math on live television.
No,
please.
it would a very minor
Was it
error
multiplied by
in
100?
one of the 32 scanning machines. A small error could cover that.
I believe
Right.
it's about 0.3% because they each had about 9,000.
Well, let me run through these. So you've got.
Votes cast were okay.
So in Ward 3, you had Pam Wright ousting, basically unseating Jim Cody.
yes, well, yeah, she beat an
So
incumbent.
they're similar on the development
No, I
issue,
don't
but
think so at all.
Jim is more moderate, but don't you think?
Anyway, well, you can. Your turn to talk.
So that's the
I
question.
might be wrong. I might be wrong about that.
So here's what the way I
Maybe
look at
I've
it.
counted this wrong.
Let me just throw out there what you both said. You think we're about basically where we were before. Just to go through the changes. I think both of the Ward 3 races took people who were pretty much, I would call it, a pro-aggressive development. In other words, we're going to vote for pretty much anything that came down the pike, and replace them with people who I think will be more thoughtful. Not that they necessarily won't vote for big developments, but I think in both Julia Malachy, who won for ward councilor in Ward 3, and Pam Wright, who won at large, at least based on what they've said and what I know of them, and they both sat at this table expressing their viewpoints, I think both of them will be take a more cautious approach, look at the long-term consequences.
But don't you think
kind of
Pam
thing.
Wright sounds like an analytical type of person who
Yeah.
was talking about making sure that whatever we do, that we're really looking at the big picture?
Yeah, so I
and
don't think we necessarily disagree.
calculating the
That's what I'm
effects of
saying is
everything.
I think Pam Wright will take a scientific. I believe she's an engineer.
She's an engineer by
Yeah,
trade.
yeah. So I think she'll take that kind of approach. Let's look at the long-term consequences. I think that the person she replaced was more of, I don't want to use something that's pejorative here, but I think more enthusiastically, aggressively pro-growth. And again, I'm not saying that people don't have good reasons for those
I didn't see
positions.
him that way, but
Yeah, no,
but that's
let's put it this
that's
way.
a more
I don't-
anti.
just to put it this way, I don't believe the person she replaced, to the best of my knowledge, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure they will by email, ken@kenparker.org, I don't believe he ever voted against a special permit application in his entire
Right,
tenure
and so
on the
and
city
so and
council.
so the same could be said. Well, I'm not sure about this, but Greg Schwartz had
Well,
tended,
just to go through it,
Yeah,
go through in order.
okay.
Julia Malachy, who won the Ward 3 ward councilor, I find to be similarly thoughtful and I
Very.
and again my viewpoint's coming out here a little bit, but I think she would vote for a large development if she thought it was good for Newton and the environmental and traffic impacts were appropriate and it wasn't going to have negative consequences that were inconsistent with our ordinance. So I don't want to say that she's anti-growth or anti-development in any
I'm
way.
sure
but
she's going to consider what's there that's getting replaced. If it's a forest, she'd probably be against it. She's very into tree conservancy.
Right. So just and Matt, feel free to jump into if you disagree with any of this. So I consider Ward 3 to be the big change in this election. If you look at what happened in Ward 5, where the ward councilor John Rice was well known for his constituent services, but and occasionally I think was opposed to a special permit, but generally seen as being
went along.
very much a yes vote on most projects. I don't think there's a huge change there. Maybe a little bit more enthusiasm for development. I mean, by the Mr. Humphrey, I believe is the name.
Well,
of
isn't Bill Humphrey viewed as the more pro development
I don't,
of
but I
the
don't
three candidates?
I think that's
I think
true.
that's right. I think he was.
But
yeah,
I don't
and
think.
Raina was the
But there was-
most anti-development, and Kathy
Yeah, I don't think
Winters.
it's fair to say she's anti-development. I think she was more a
Well,
more moderate approach.
People who are pro-development would say anti-development.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that.
And do.
No, I know. I mean, I don't think that's fair.
I'm
to
just
say
saying,
people-
we need a quick shorthand.
I think that the shorthand shouldn't be pro-development and anti-development, and the reason why is I'm pro-development, but I think the development ought to be at a reasonable pace and thoughtful, not 10,000 new housing units.
Well,
in the
we
next
might want to
10
discuss
years.
that, see if we find common ground, because I think that some of the developments need to be larger just to be able to finance some of the other aspects, like at Riverside,
Okay.
where you need to have a certain amount of density in order to fund the
We can
access
certainly we
development.
can certainly get to that, but just to finish going down the list.
Right, so we have Brenda Noel beating
So that was
Lisa Gordon in
that was no
6.
change. Though. That's an
Right,
incumbent.
that's no change. So
So
going back to Ward
the
5, my
other-
point there was that
Okay.
if you didn't have the write-in campaign, I believe you would have had a Kathy
Right,
Winters win,
Right.
and she's
and
a
she would have
moderate.
been more in the she would
in the
She's a
slower
thoughtful
development as
moderate,
opposed to
slow it down.
bigger development.
I would
Right,
call the
which is-
moderate development rather than aggressive development.
Yeah.
Right, and we can
But
talk
that-
about the
but
effects
I'm
of
not talking
being-
now about the politics of how people voted. My question here is, what is the practical implication of who's actually being seated on the council? And there, I would suggest that it's not really that different, because John Rice voted for most of the special permits.
I agree.
Even though we might have someone who's more enthusiastic about big development, I don't know that there's really going to be that much of a change.
You know,
as a
I
practical
think the
matter.
bigger area where we might see change is this. I mean, many projects have gone forward with special permits. But with the composition of the city council that we've had the past 2 years and the 2 years before that, some of the councilors have worked to impose conditions on the developers to, for instance, put in electrical chargers, car chargers, even just access to wall plugs, 120 volt, what's called level 1 chargers, so that every parking space could have just a normal plug to charge any electric car. Slowly, but it's a lot better than
very
nothing.
slowly, very slowly.
I've owned one. That's how I charged it. It was very slow, but it works.
Right, I think the focus should be on the level 2 chargers,
And
maybe even
So
fast,
ju-
a
ju-
fast
ju-
charger.
My point is,
Yeah.
the city councils that we've had over the past few terms have been able to impose some conditions on developers as a condition for their vote, in exchange for
Right.
their vote. Not in
Quid pro quo?
Thank you, Ken. Not in a nefarious sense, but in a
Yeah,
negotiated
no, which is
sense.
Illegal,
absolutely,
an illegal.
just to be clear, that is an entirely appropriate
Yes,
quid pro quo.
and that's what city councilors should do.
But here's the reality,
My-
and I can, on that point, I can speak to it from 18 years of serving on that august body, is that you only get, you can get what I would call window dressing concessions from a developer if they know they have the votes. But if they're not sure if they have their 16 votes, that's when you get the meaty substantive concessions. And so, to me, the critical question is, when a developer looks at the city council, are they going to go, I got my 16 votes there, sure, I'll throw some minor,
Right.
and
Well, if
I'm sure
what
they'll
you're
put some
saying is right. If you look back at 28 Austin Street, I think one of the councilors, I think Amy
Yeah, they
Sangiolo,
didn't have her. They had to do
had a
more
lot of
affordable housing.
leverage at the
Exactly.
end. They needed her vote,
Right.
and she got a couple of more. I don't remember the number of affordable units,
Right.
which
That's
was a
exactly
priority
it.
for
Right.
her.
And
Right.
so that's the leverage I'm talking about. And
Right.
so this is why the calculation is so interesting
Yeah.
to me.
Even one vote. I think you're right. I think having Julia Maliki on the council will make a big difference, because one additional vote that's not reliably in the big rapid development camp should let the city councilors who are interested in voting to approve extract more concessions.
And let me
from
throw
developers.
another bit of grist into the mill here,
Okay.
which is, I don't think we know how Holly Ryan is going to vote in Ward 8. Holly Ryan was elected without an opponent, a walk-on
Right.
for Cheryl Lappin's seat. Now, Cheryl, I think, very thoughtful, smart person, I believe voted for most of the large-scale developments. So Holly Ryan is a potential change from that, possibly, depending on how she votes.
And she ran uncontested.
She,
right?
Exactly. So there were no candidate forums at which she had to articulate a viewpoint.
But
on
did
this
she
thing.
put out a campaign video and talk about development, or
You know,
not? I don't remember
think
seeing one.
that she certainly answered the League of Women Voters questions, but I don't think without that sort of back and forth of a debate, you really get that as good a sense, at least, of where someone is. And I go, certainly a smart, thoughtful, reasonable person. You never know where people are going to come out until they, until they're in the heat of, because there is huge political pressure on people to go with these developments. Right or wrong, there is what I would call a self-righteous ire on the part of people who support development. Maybe they are right that they're saving the planet. Matt and I talked about this at great length on an earlier show, whether, in fact, it's actually good for our carbon footprint in the city to be building these large-scale dense developments. Spoiler alert, no, it's not. But or at least
It depends.
That's my opinion. The ones that are being built in Newton, no, they're not. They're not in any way favorable.
But again,
climate
putting
change
aside
perspective.
whether it's good or not, there is that belief that it's good. And there's a lot of people in the
Well,
community.
there's an argument
political
that's
pressure.
made.
And there were arguments that were made loudly and repeatedly on forums like Village 14 and on Facebook groups. I don't know.
And
if you're-
attacks against
Well,
people like
right.
your ward councilor.
Right.
Yes.
So yeah.
Over and over.
So people, there is a belief among some that, and again, I plan on exploring this around this table with people in great detail in future shows. People with strong views on both sides of this issue, and I have someone in particular in mind who is a fervent believer in the importance of dense development for preventing climate change, or believer that I want to have on the show to have that topic fully vetted. However, my point is simply the point that when people, even if they come to the city council believing that they're going to take a balanced approach, there's a lot of peer pressure, and there's a lot of, if I want to get reelected, I've got to kind of go with the flow pressure. So I don't know how the newcomers who haven't, articulated views, how they'll react to all that pressure. That's all I'm saying. I'm not getting into we don't have time right now to get into the meat of whether that's true or not.
Right. Well, I think that these issues are going to be.
We're missing one though. There's 5, 2 in Ward 3. We're assuming there's 5 counting in Ward 6 that, assuming Greg Schwartz loses his recount, to Alicia Bowman, who's again probably the most aggressively pro-development, based on what she said at candidate forums of the new 5. And then
Right, there were 4 contested at-large races, and I've only got 3.
Okay, so hang on. So Ward 1, there were no contested races. Ward 2, Ward 2, there was no.
Well, Ward 2, you had, there was no change.
had
There
no
was a
change.
Yeah, but so
race, but the result didn't change. The incumbents won.
Someone else didn't. So maybe I'm wrong.
You
I
had
thought there
Jennifer
were 5.
Bentley and
Yeah,
Tariq
and
Lucas
Tariq
running
Lucas,
against.
so there was no
But
change
they
there.
lost to Jake Auchincloss and Susan
Right.
Albright.
So
Right.
maybe I'm just wrong that when I say there are 5 new councilors.
I had 2. I had
Now-
2,
now I'm,
2 and 2 that I counted. So, in terms
So
of
in Ward
2
5, there's ward
less
councilor.
enthusiastic development
So
people,
maybe there's
and
only 4. Maybe I don't know where I got this.
Julie Malachy, Pam Wright, Alicia Bowman. Holly Ryan is new.
Oh yeah, okay.
Bill Humphrey.
And Bill
And
Humphrey.
Bill
So
Humphrey.
there are
That's
5.
5.
Okay,
Yeah.
I did count correctly.
Right. Well, Holly was uncontested. That's why I
Holly's
didn't include her.
uncontested.
Holly was uncontested where an incumbent
So it's
didn't seek
3.
re-election.
It's
Sure.
wards.
Same
It's
for Bill's race.
3, 3, 5, 6, 8. There we go. 5 people.
Okay.
All right. So now that in each of those 5, the question is: are they more aggressively pro-development, less aggressively pro-development, or about the same? And I think the first 2 are more moderate development. The 2 in Ward 3. I think in Ward 5, maybe marginally more aggressively pro-development. Ward 6, I think compared to Greg Schwartz, Alicia Bowman will be aggressively pro-development.
Oh, absolutely.
and-
but
and
Yeah,
so-
absolutely. But
I don't
also-
think Greg voted against
Greg
any of the-
voted. Greg ultimately
He voted for Austin
all
Street.
the
He voted
development.
for Washington
And
Place.
by the way, Greg, if you're listening, thank you again for taking the time. I'm speaking to Greg here for taking the time to have me chew your ear off for 30 minutes about how wrong you were.
That's
to vote
his
for
standard
Austin
amount
Street.
of time to have
You
his
let
ear
people
chewed
chew.
off.
How does he have any ears
I chewed
left?
his ear off for 30 minutes about Austin Street. So I think
Yeah.
Greg
So
is-
which one did you
but
choose?
I
your
do
off
want to
for 30
say
minutes about?
All of them.
Greg is our ward councilor, and I just want to say that I did really appreciate his intelligence and his willingness to listen and thoughtfulness, and I felt that he was actually working through some of the arguments for and against on the phone with me at that time.
I totally
Or
agree. We
he
have
totally
common ground
faked it.
here.
We have common ground.
Common
Because
ground.
I will say, I mean, also
Greg is
as
great.
it's a real loss. I mean, really smart guy, really thoughtful.
He's a very accomplished guy too.
Yeah, I know. Very impressive. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he's a doctor. He's a lawyer. He went to Yale. You know, it's like
Yeah.
no,
A
but
Jewish
no, but,
grandmother would go crazy
right,
with that.
exactly.
Both?
yeah,
I
exactly.
didn't know it was possible.
So, but no, but and a good guy too. But I mean, again, not to say. By the way, I want to be clear about this. I think Alicia Bowman, terrific person, does a lot on the
She's
safe
great.
routes to school, the bicycle stuff.
Yeah.
Fabulous person. I disagree with her on the pace of development question. That's not a criticism of her and as a human being, or
I
even
believe that
as a
she's
responsible-
also, together with Brendan Noel, has the same view that you referred to earlier about doing away with single
Yeah,
residence
well, I think
zoning.
Alicia Bowman was the only one at the debates to really articulate the idea of abolishing single-family zoning, which for our audience to understand what that would mean every single-family house in the city, you could put 2 houses there without going to the the city council for a special
Right,
permit.
right.
So that would be a lot of automatic freebie growth. We're not talking about the growth that you get from the Riverside projects and the Northlands and the, all the stuff that's going to happen on Washington Street that Corf owns.
Bob Core.
The Corf.
I agree. Common ground here. I think Alicia's a wonderful person.
She's very passionate.
She is.
She fights hard.
Yes. I've been on many of the Bike Newton events.
Which she leads.
Yes. And I and my family have met her many times. We've ridden in parades and on the, the
Also
tour to
safe
Newton.
routes to school, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I was on
I-
that group with her.
I disagree with her on the pace of development. But I would wager that, as with many city councilors with whom I disagree on the pace of development or scale of development, that's probably one of the only things that we disagree on.
Right. So here's an easy prediction question in terms of development. What's going to happen with the city council vote on the Northland project on Needham Street? Any predictions from the panel?
I think it'll pass.
Oh,
I mean-
what do you think the vote will be? I mean, that's
I'd have to take a look at where the details are now. It's been like a year since I actually saw a presentation on that, so I don't know how much it's changed. It doesn't sound like the size has changed.
not very much. It was 820 something. It's down to 800 units. I
Yeah,
think.
to me it feels like it's going through, but I may be wrong
it got
about
voted
that.
out of committee
but I
with
think
a
that
6-0 vote with 2 abstentions in the land use committee. So it does
it
certainly
seems
seem
to have support. I think that there are people that have advocated for certain things like extending the green line behind on
Serge
the buildings.
Nedeljkovic
Yes.
advocated for years, but now that's become like a bike path back there. So that ship
Well,
has
that
sailed, it looks
doesn't.
like.
Well, no, you could rip out the bike path and put it.
I suppose, but there were rails there, and they ripped out the rails.
Right.
That would
but
be,
it wouldn't be that. He has a justification for why you could still do that
Oh,
project.
he's still advocating that.
Who does?
Serge Nedeljkovic on the Highlands Area
Another
Council.
very smart guy, but
Very, very smart, very hardworking guy who's done a lot of great work.
anesthesiologist.
And then
A
there's
doctor, but not a lawyer.
but I think what Serge has been fighting for in the Northland thing, and before the Northland project, has been undergrounding the utilities
That's
on
that's
Needham
another
Street.
issue that a lot of people have experienced. But okay, but bottom line is, you think it's going to pass pretty overwhelmingly?
I think so.
Okay, and so we're going to get another pass at this on a related topic. But Matt, what do you think is going to happen?
I think it's going to pass, and I think it's crazy.
Okay, you've answered my second question. Is it a good thing or not? So we'll let you, Steve, answer. Is this a good thing if it passes or not?
It's not my favorite project. Let me put it that way.
If you were on
I
the city
drive
council,
on
would you- would you-
Needham Street all the
Would you vote for it
time.
or not if you were on the city council?
I would be biased against voting for it. I'd have to look into. I'd have
And
to
you mean
do the
biased in the
detail.
best possible way, right?
Yes, the confirmation bias. But no, I would be very concerned, and since I'm not having to vote on this, I haven't delved into all of I mean, I'm mainly concerned about the traffic analysis and where that would leave things. And also, I mean, we did add a lot of kids to the school system when we did the Avalon apartments. That was downplayed when I inquired years ago, and it turns out I think
100 students.
it's more than 100 students.
And so it projects out to hundreds with almost
Right.
3 times the number of units.
Right, and we're talking about 800 units.
Right.
That seems
It's
like
almost
a lot.
triple the size, or 2.5 times the size of
Right.
Avalon.
So I think what we're talking about is you do that project, you're probably going to have to do an override to build a 16th elementary school. I could be proven wrong, and I'd have to look at the enrollment predictions, which the enrollment in the schools has now leveled off the past couple of years and declined slightly.
There's a combination of tear downs and building 2 families where 2 houses where there was one. If you layer that on to this project,
Right, plus
may well.
Riverside.
So bottom line is,
I don't know that Newton does a good job of cross-referencing what housing we're adding and what the school system needs.
fair point. Matt, you were allowed a one-word response
took
that
all
it was
your
crazy. But why is it crazy, Matt?
Well, I'm going to build on what you were just saying, Steve, that you don't know if Newton does a good job of correlating planning for development and traffic with impact on the schools. I'm going to answer that by saying no, we don't. It's not unknown. I know that we don't. We take developers' words on their projections for number of students per unit in rentals. They are consistently under and well under. And every unit that's been built, every development that's been built, has more people and more students living in it than are projected. Why? Well, maybe it's because it serves developers' financial interests to do so. And as of the past decades, there's been nobody in city government who pushes them to be more accurate in projections for number of students. And there is no appetite in the city government that I've seen to push them to fund things like a school. In other towns, in other states, when people build huge developments, whether it's apartment buildings or single-family homes or two-family homes, they build schools. They have to. That's what they get required to do by the city or the state, so that the people who move there with their kids have a school to send their children to. But we don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, it is remarkable to me that the Riverside proposal is going to add more units to Newton Lower Falls than already exist in Newton Lower Falls. So in other words, it will more than double the size and population of that neighborhood.
Yeah.
I mean, by a considerable margin. It's not even like there's like 400 homes there, and they're adding 600 something homes.
And look,
The Upper Falls neighborhood will be similarly impacted.
And I just want to say, like, I can see that these projects make financial sense for the developers because they will make a lot of money off of them. But I don't see any aspect in which they make financial sense for Newton. And we talked about climate change earlier, and if you have not spoken with me for more than 5 minutes at some point in the past, you may not know that I used to be a climatologist. I still follow developments in climate science. I consider it very important. There is no way in which these developments in Newton make sense in other regards, outside of for Newton, economically, and for the community of Newton. They don't make sense from a climate change perspective either, because they're new construction, and they're being built in a place where to get around, you have to use a car.
Riverside has transit. They have buses and trains.
Look, we have transit throughout
We're
Newton.
talking about the one in Upper Falls.
We have transit throughout Newton. And really, by Boston regional standards, we have good transit. Not the best, not as good as Boston or Cambridge or Somerville, but good. It's not enough. It's only adequate if all that you consider yourself ever wanting to do is commute into Boston on a commuter schedule.
And of course, that doesn't even apply to Northland because you still have to get down Needham Street to get to the T.
Well, there's that. But
Which is why it would have been a great idea to extend the T.
Well,
and it still would be a great idea to extend the T, whether you build an apartment building there or not. My point is, these apartment buildings where hundreds of
there are
people will move
capacity
in.
issues too, of course, in terms of the.
Look,
Well, let me
the
refute
lines
that.
here already are near to or at their capacity. My point is that building these things and calling them transit-oriented development doesn't make them development that is going to be able to only use transit. Because anybody who lives at Northland or Riverside will also need to run errands, to go buy food, to go to a job that's not in downtown Boston. And there is no transit that does that. I've
Right,
tried.
Well, one could argue that it depends where those people are coming from. If these are people that are moving to be closer to their jobs in Boston or the greater Boston area, and they're coming from Ashland or someplace or Framingham, and they're shortening their commutes, and if they can take the T, you're getting some people off of the Mass Pike. Then that could be argued that that's a good thing. The question is, how many people are we talking about? And it's hard to predict that.
Well, I think that individuals are hard to predict, but groups are not hard to predict. And I think that the math is pretty simple. If you take a community that's net commercial positive, in other words, has more commercial, more jobs than it has residents, and you add residential, on average, you're going to shorten commutes. So that's why in central cities like Boston or New York or someplace where there's a commercial district, if you put housing there, well, that's where the jobs are, and so you're going to shorten the average commute. But Newton is net residential positive. So, for example, you take someone like me, my law firm's my office is in Newton Highlands, and I live in Newton Highlands, but there aren't that many office buildings in Newton. If you could take one of the downtown big law firms and plunk it near onto Needham Street, then that would be great for the carbon footprint of the Boston area. And frankly, what Needham has done along these lines is great for the carbon footprint of the Boston area, because Needham was a net residential positive community, and they built, on First Street, Second Street, they've got the TripAdvisor. They planned out proactively building a whole development there, which takes people from Newton, Needham, Wellesley, Weston, this area, and says you don't have to commute far out. You've got jobs right there. The same goes for services. This idea that commercial generates more trips. Commercial doesn't generate trips because people have to go to businesses anyway. What commercial does from an environmental standpoint is shorten trips if you put a commercial use closer to where people live. Think about a movie theater. People in Newton like to go to the movies occasionally. If you have to go to Legacy Place in Dedham, or to the Braintree Cinema, or to the Fenway Cinema, or out to Route 128, if you don't want to spend $30 a ticket at the Chestnut Hill, you have to go out to Framingham. If you put a movie theater in Newton, you would, even though that people say, oh, look at all the trips it's generating, it would be net carbon negative. It would reduce the amount because people would be taking shorter trips.
Although the work commute's more important than those trips because they're more frequent. So if somebody is cutting their commute in half, from a 20-mile commute to living near Riverside and being able to get on the train.
But the thing to keep in mind is those businesses, people work at them too. So they also reduce, by putting commercial near residential, it does both. The people who work in the businesses, you put offices, you put services there. The people who are offering those services, those people will also have a shorter commute. So putting commercial on Needham Street would be much better. It would reduce our carbon footprint. Adding more residential would increase our carbon footprint.
The other problem with that part of the argument that putting more housing in Newton is going to draw people from farther west, farther north, farther south.
A little expensive for that.
Well, it could also draw people who are currently living in Brookline or Cambridge or Somerville or Boston to be someplace where maybe they get a little more space for their money, or the schools are better, hopefully.
If they're not too overcrowded.
Well, as people's motivation for moving, we're not saying if they actually are. And,
no, they're good. They're still good.
And you could easily have people lengthening their commutes or moving here from elsewhere in the country. And I think it's a bit of unsupported unsupported reasoning
Well, I mean,
to
and
say
also-
we're going to shorten people's commutes because we're not requiring, and nor can we require, that only people who've got 30-mile commutes move to these places.
Well, I mean, and with a couple of math guys at the table, I can say this. You can often extrapolate by looking at the asymptote. In other words, what happens if you go to the logical extreme? If density is good for the environment, then that would mean that the carbon footprint of New York City would be less than the carbon footprint of a similar land area in Newton. It doesn't work out that way. You're not
Right, there are trade-offs.
exactly. You can't just build your way out. And I just want to say about in terms of climate change, this is an existential crisis. And I think people want an easy way out. They want to feel good, and it's a totally natural reaction to say, I want to feel like I'm doing something to fight climate change, so I'm going to support the Northland Project.
But even if even if you take the premise that Northland is going to help with climate change somehow, okay, it's not on the scale of the problem. And it's not, we're wasting our time talking about why we should be building these things because of climate change, when in fact, what's really needed is massive change at a large scale by the government and about 100 or so huge companies that are actually causing the problem. It's not tearing down single-family homes.
But here's the problem.
And
Northland
moving
is
people to
actually an
apartment buildings.
obstacle to what I think we should be doing, which is making Newton climate neutral. We could do that if we had a plan to develop enough jobs in
climate
Newton.
action plan.
Yeah, well, such a plan exists, but I think, or a document exists by that name. Whether it's a viable plan, I don't know. But what I'm suggesting is simply that if we want Newton to be carbon neutral, what we will need to do is make it very, very expensive to burn fossil fuels in Newton. In other words, you would need to
That's
make.
going to go over really well.
But it wouldn't happen on a city by city basis. You would have to have a carbon tax that takes the real cost to the world of CO2 emissions and applies it individually to each of us. In other words, you take the externalities, as they call them, and make us all internalize them. Then you would say, okay, I'm going to be paying $10 a gallon for gas. Guess what? I'm going to get an electric car,
Sure,
right?
but that has to happen at the national level and the international level, and it's not going to be something that the city of Newton is going to accomplish.
To an extent, but let me tell you why Northland is an obstacle to that, is because what it says is we're just going to keep building more things without dealing with these questions. And by putting in, the idea that by reducing the amount of parking, it's just going to create an economic demand for parking. It was the Filene's building down the street. People will be renting out the spaces there, or they'll be parking on neighborhood streets. That is not going to stop people from driving. That parking gets more expensive. It's just.
Right. What they could do is encourage people to buy electric vehicles and install some charging stations.
But they won't even have enough parking spaces for that there under this plan. So they'll be, if they have charging stations there, that will be only for the vehicles that are there. They'll have to have charging stations, and they'll build another garage on some other property that people will rent spaces on, and hopefully we won't have control over that because we aren't being proactive. And here's my fundamental point: is Newton is in reactive mode. We wait for the developers, the corps, to buy up properties and say, here's what I want to do. And then we negotiate from a position of weakness. Rather than, why doesn't the city of Newton have a development authority? Well, actually, we do. Our planning department could do this. Buy up the properties in an area, rezone them for what we want, develop a master plan for what we want, and then there would be, and of course, we would be upzoning them, and the city would be able to fund the entire endeavor with the increase in value. Because here's the secret that no one wants to tell you, which is that we give away many millions of dollars in value by granting a special permit. We greatly increase the value of a property, and we get a tiny fraction of that back in the bones that they throw us with these conditions. They are tiny compared to the value we're granting. And one more thing that people don't know is that the special permit for Northland is entirely illegal. It cannot legally be granted. The reason for that is the city council is required to compare its impact to that of the by right alternative. And that's what we used to do when we considered special permits. When I was on the city council, the planning department would say, here's the by right subdivision of this property. We looked at it, for example, for the Stop and Shop that got narrowly voted down for where the Avalon is now. And we looked at and then here's how much traffic that would generate. But now for Northland, the planning department did not give a by right alternative. They gave another special permit alternative, which is fundamentally wrong. And if anybody sued to prevent this, once the special permit is granted, to prevent it from going into effect, they would have a darn good case that it's arbitrary and capricious because the city council did not follow the law and its own ordinance. But anyway.
Any lawyers out there listening?
But we have other topics to get to, shall we?
Sure, let's do it.
So let's talk about the political winners and losers from this last election. The obvious ones are obviously winners are people who won the election. Losers are people who didn't get elected. But beyond that, let's go around. Who's the biggest winner in the cities in the election this year? Steve, you want to go first on this?
Well, I had a loser in mind.
Okay,
I have to think of a winner.
Let's do biggest loser first, and then we'll do.
Well,
okay.
I'm going to go with write-in campaigns. Can it be a thing, or does it have to be
That's a beautiful answer.
So
I love that answer.
write-in campaigns can be really damaging, and we learned that this year. And I'm friendly with many of the candidates.
So you mean Raina? Just to be clear, Raina Getz ran for ward councilor in Ward 5.
And I would have liked to have seen a different candidate win that race. So I'm on one side of that, but it doesn't matter. So if
you were supporting a different candidate.
Yes, but I like both Raina and Kathy. Okay, but the problem is if let's say that you're worried about development. Let's say you're worried about development, and you have someone who's very gung ho about doing lots of development.
They could win with a third plus one of the vote.
If you are a write-in candidate going against a moderate and that pro-development person, you're going to take votes away from the moderate person, and that's exactly what happened. I think that there has to be a more careful calculation before somebody does that.
Like that.
It can be damaging.
I think that's a really interesting point. Let's hear what Matt's biggest loser was.
Biggest loser? Well,
you want to do biggest winner first? You have a
maybe I'll go biggest winner. I just want to, Steve, comment on what you said. Ranked choice voting would be a really nice thing to implement citywide.
Agreed.
Because for many reasons, one of them is it would take out that horse trading aspect of what should I do if there's a write-in candidate who I like or who I don't like.
Okay. Well,
said,
let me just weigh in on this one, and then we'll go around the table and do another round. I've got to say, I consider the biggest winner in this to be our system of preliminaries that narrows it down to twice the number of candidates as there are seats. Because the lesson is, it was darn stupid to support, and I take responsibility for this as someone who supported the write-in candidate, and I knew better too. I mean, it was poor judgment on my part to buy into the enthusiasm because it was a terrific person and I liked her, and oh wow, she'll be great. I should have just said, no, take the sign out of my yard. You lost the preliminary. That's the system. Sorry you got started late. No excuses, because the system does narrow it down to saying where you need basically a majority of the vote to win. It's a darn good system, but it broke down because people like me, and I don't vote in Ward 5, so it wasn't me per se, but I continued to endorse and support and have a sign in my yard for that person, who's a terrific person, by the way, and I'm not blaming her either. It's just a reminder that for the system to work, we have to facilitate it. It's really a lesson we're learning on a national level now, with the system only works if the individuals involved are committed to making the system work. And right now we have people in the White House who are not committed to making the system work. And so we all need to say, you know what, even though I have an interest in Raina Getz winning, I've got to step back and say, you know what, the system is more important. The integrity of our democratic checks and balances and institutions is more important than me getting the candidate I want elected. And I didn't remember that when I kept that sign in my lawn, but I'm darn well going to remember it next election.
Yeah.
So here's where I disagree with Steve then. It's not write-ins that were the loser. It's write-ins when there's already a contested race. Because when you had...
Right, if you're a moderate and you want to do a write-in campaign and say these two candidates are too extreme, then you might assume that you're taking votes away from each of them equally.
But that's not even my. But just to be clear, my point is where you have an uncontested race, like they had in Ward 4 when Jay Harney didn't run for re-election and only one candidate got on the ballot in time because he was going to run against Jay, and so Jay didn't run again, and suddenly you had an uncontested race, Chris Markowitz in Ward 4, and then Ms. Sharma hopped in with a write-in campaign. That's the way write-ins. I think that's a productive write-in.
That's fine. I'm not against write-ins across the board. I'm just saying when you decide to do it because you lost against two other candidates in the primary, be careful what you're doing. There was a write-in campaign against Margaret Albright in the school committee, and that did surprisingly
very last minute.
Right, but considering the last-minute nature of it, and I thought that Julia, I think her name was Gabler or something like that. I thought she did pretty well. She got almost 1,000 votes.
Didn't Margaret end up getting more votes than anyone else in the school committee?
She was
not
but
this
she
time.
got a lot.
Oh, it's the
maybe
time
7,000.
Past
like
years, she's been the
7,000.
highest vote getter.
But I think that there's a lesson learned. Just getting back to the lessons from this, if you look at a campaign, and I don't know a lot of the details about Julia's campaign, but it's interesting to me that she jumped in at the last minute. It was over an issue with the Horace Mann School. If people know about that, there were the school conditions. People were complaining, and there was a lot of parent and teacher union involvement in complaining about the conditions of the Carr building, which is now the Horace Mann School.
It had been used for years as a swing space, essentially.
So the thing that fueled, I think, I'm postulating here, the success of Julia's writing campaign at the last minute to get nearly 1,000 votes when nobody really knew her that much. There's network and there's money, right? When you're trying to run in a city like this, you need to have a network, and when you're highly involved in the school, PTOs or whatever parent organizations, and you have an issue that you're running against, that's a powerful thing. One wonders if Julia had started early, if she had known that she wanted to run earlier because this issue came up late, what would have happened then?
So I want to do another round, interesting questions, of the winners and losers from this election. So do you have a winner or a loser, Matt?
Sure, I do. I want to talk about my, not hometown, but my home ward
Village
race. You just mentioned that there's, in any race, money and there's network.
Right.
So the Ward 2 councilor race, Emily Norton won re-election again, and I'm delighted about it. I think she's wonderful. I think she's great for the ward. I think she's great for the city. And she's got a very well-developed network. Before she was elected to city council, she ran a blog, Great Newton Schools. Her tagline was something like, "I go to the school committee meetings so that you don't have to."
And she did. She went.
She did.
And she did.
It was great.
And she's got the best
that's how
newsletter of anybody in the city.
I love her newsletter. She won.
You don't have to live in Ward 2 to subscribe. So.
Also true. Good point, Ken. EmilyNorton.org, I believe. Her opponent, Brian Barash.
Is it Barash or Barash? I always thought it was Barash.
Oh,
is it?
I don't know.
You know,
Ken, can we find some common ground on how to
you know
pronounce
what?
his name?
I think we can ask the gentleman how his name is pronounced and report it back on the next show,
I
maybe?
will ask him
Okay.
next time I see it. I'm sensitive to this because my last name is frequently mispronounced.
Yospin, right? Is
No.
Yospin?
No, it's not.
It's
Is that the
Yospin.
Yospin son?
You
No,
spin.
it's not that either. Okay. So my point is, that race for a ward councilor race, I think had more money spent on it, I
Yes,
believe, than any
I think
other
that's
race
true.
citywide, and I believe it set records
Like $60,000
across
plus.
all time for any city councilor race, period. And this is a race in which maybe 3,000 people vote in a very high turnout year. We didn't quite hit that, but we hit very high turnout for
Tremendous turnout for a non-mayoral year?
yeah, non-mayoral,
Okay.
non-congressional year.
Which is the perfect segue. Okay, finish your point.
So my point is,
What's the winner or the loser?
well, the winner is clearly Emily,
Okay.
and the loser is Brian. He has said, and I've and written that he drove very high turnout in the race, and that's true. But so did people's opposition to him. which drove
Right.
higher
So
turnout.
I'm gonna agree with you that that was the most important race in the city, but I have a different idea of who the winner is. The winner was the city of Newton because Emily is a gem. She is so knowledgeable.
love Emily.
She is a superstar. She is an environmental, maelstrom of good ideas. I mean, she's like.
Ken, I got to say, I don't feel like you're disagreeing with me.
Okay,
here.
I know.
Find
But
common ground.
I know we both think Emily's
Yeah.
fabulous. But what I'm saying is, Emily won that race. But had she lost, she would have gone on with her life. It wouldn't have been so bad for her. I think it would have been disaster for the city.
But I have to say, I mean, I love Emily, you do too. A lot of people love Brian. I mean, I follow him, I'm connected with him on Facebook,
Yeah,
and I see the loving messages and the people
I'm not
encouraging
saying-
him to go
I'm
on.
not saying-
So he definitely has a fan base.
To be clear, I'm not saying anything negative about him. I'm saying the loss of Emily Norton would have been a disaster from the city government.
Well, I think that
agree.
Emily has a very strong voice that's really maybe a minority voice on the city council on a lot of issues. And I think that, you don't want to lose such a high quality, strong voice.
Exactly. And we only have a moment. Okay. Real.
I just wanted to take a minute to say something nice about Brian, because I do like the guy. I think he's sincere and hardworking. He definitely knocked on a lot of doors.
He worked I think he walked on doors like 4 times. He went around.
Yeah,
I heard from people who've seen him a lot. They can react either way to that, of course.
That's true too.
yeah,
I heard that from
obviously,
neighbors.
a terrific progressive Democrat. We only have time for one little final thing, and I've got to get your opinion on this. What did this election mean for Mayor Fuller? Is this make it more likely she's going to get reelected, less likely? Is she likely to have an opponent? Is she likely to have an easy walk to reelection? Any thoughts on whether she was a winner or a loser out of this election and the issues that were raised this cycle?
I don't think that the election changed a lot for her. I think there are other issues that will change things for Mayor Fuller, like the New Cal situation.
Well, that was something that was discussed in this election.
It was discussed in the election, but it's also just something that's going to continue to be an issue.
So
and the
what's your prediction?
teachers' contract, if the teachers strike, that's going to be a big problem for her.
Is she going to have a serious opponent who gets at least 40% of the vote or possibly wins? That's my question for you.
I predict she will.
Serious opponent for Ruth Ann Fuller?
I can't predict vote totals for her opponent, but I'm certain that someone is going to run against her and mount a serious campaign against her.
I mean, a serious candidate gets 40%.
I just want to say, I think she's trying.
usually.
I think she's doing a great job. She's trying really hard. She's made some mistakes, but I think that they're the mistakes of someone who's trying to do a lot. And anytime you do a lot, you are going to and do big things like create a senior center.
Well,
that you're going to ruffle some feathers.
Well, it's just to put my 2 cents in on this. I think it was this cycle was a little bit of a rocky road for her, in that I think people were stirred up that might not have otherwise run, who are now more likely to run against her. So I also think that there are 3 big issues. There's the I won't call it the teachers' action so much as the school budget and how much of the city's resources go to the schools. That's going to be a big issue. The land acquisitions for like Webster Woods are going to be a big issue. The planning process that went into the senior center location will be a big issue. And then I think the issue we all talked about before, if people start to see more traffic in the city and overcrowded classrooms as a result of development, that could be the biggest issue for Mayor Fuller if she doesn't articulate a clear vision for where Newton is going and then work with the city council to achieve that vision. That will be ultimately the most important issue in the next election, I believe. So my prediction is yes, she will have a very serious challenger or 2. And with that, I think it's time to thank the panelists. Matt, thank you so
Ken.
much. Steve, a pleasure to have you back on the show.
Great to be here.
And thank you at home for watching. Thanks to our fabulous crew, Brian and Eric and Will. And please join us again next time when we try to find just a little bit more common ground. And by the way, we'll have former school committee chair Matt Hills on next month. And we will be talking about the city budget and funding the schools and a lot of related and the the labor situations in the school department and how he dealt with them as school committee chair. It's going to be a fabulous hour. So again, please join us again next time when we try to find just a little bit more common ground.